everyone, my name is Katrina Kibben. I'm the managing editor of Recruiting Daily, and I am here today with two very special guests for this recorded webinar. So we don't traditionally record webinars, but we had some scheduling difficulties. So I'm really glad to be able to get these guys together in one place to talk about a topic that is really, really important to HR technology and kind of figuring out your tech stack, but one that pretty much no one's talking about right now, and that's middleware. But before we jump right in, let's have each of our guests today introduce themselves like they need an introduction. Bill, why don't you go first? Tell people a little bit about you.
Hi, I'm Bill Boorman. I'm the Managing Director of Innovation and Technology for Recruiting Daily and the founder of True Recruiting Conference. I'm also advisor to a bunch of startups like Rollpoint and work on integrations with some global organizations. So this is, for my sins, one of my expert topics, if you want to call it that.
Absolutely. Tincup.
Sure. William Tincup, president of Recruiting Daily, and I also, like Bill, advise a lot of startups, Roleplay being one of them, and happy to hear. It's a great topic. It's a topic that buyers and users of software should be talking about more.
Absolutely. And of course, want to give a big shout out. Both of them mentioned Rollpoint, but I will give the explicit shout out to Rollpoint. Thank you for sponsoring this webinar. Be sure to check them out if you're interested in learning more about middleware. All right, so Bill, why don't you give us a high level of what middleware is and why it matters for the average, HR practitioner?
Okay, so there's two key issues to consider here, and I think the first one is coming at technology from a user viewpoint. So if I'm a user and our audience is primarily recruiters and talent acquisition, I actually want all my technology to be in one stack, and I don't want to be thinking that I'm logging into my referral software, I'm logging into my job posting software, I'm having to go into my CRM or my ATS or the many different systems. I think one of the customers that I work with uses 27 different pieces of technology or 27 different vendors. You don't want to have to log in and out 27 times or have your data in 27 places without it flowing in one direction. So what a true integration technology does is enable you to operate all of those through one screen, which gives the user one screen experience, which makes life so much better. But it also makes sure all of the data going in and coming out is in the same format and is flowing in the same direction, so you can get in and interrogate that properly. And that's kind of to understand how key that is. If you've got so many different touch points and you've got all your data in a different place, you just can't organize or segment or understand anything of what you're doing. The complication that we get with this is most people actually talk about when they talk about integration are really talking about emulation, which is something quite different, and that's most of the technology that we've seen. Emulation is copying one process to another as if it was being done by a human. So, for example, when we talk about mobile apply, it might be uploading a resume, and it's kind of like you've sent that resume off to somewhere, and somebody's sat down and they've started entering into the system in exactly the same way. That's emulation. That information is going from one place into another, but nothing is coming back out. In a true integration, what you've got is data going in and coming out. So each technology is speaking to each other and operating on that basis.
Absolutely. Makes sense.
If that makes sense, the short version of what it is, and trying to make it sound really exciting for the listeners. Stick with us. Right. I'll give you a gem right at the end if you stick with us, I promise you.
So is 27 a pretty typical tech stack, like 27 tools that are all integrating? Tincup, is that something you experience a lot with these practitioners?
Or not integrating, I think that's the main question.
Or not integrating, or emulating.
Oh yeah, I don't think there's any two technology stacks perfectly alike anywhere in the world. I think that these are organic things that happen. I think that some clarity, probably brought by Bill and other people smart like him, is that, here's what you should buy, and here's kind of the order in which you should buy these things, and here's how they should play together. There's a sandbox, if you will, and the kids should all play well in the sandbox together. So I think the larger the company, it follows, it tracks that the more technology that they consume, right? If you have a global enterprise and they have 100 employees in 140 different countries, just payroll technologies and benefit technologies is going to be in the 30s and 40s. Just handling that transaction. Not to deal with compensation or performance or anything that happens in talent acquisition. So I think that as you track the larger, it's more complex systems, and you have amongst those, you have players that are integration friendly, data friendly, if you will, and you have players in there that aren't integration friendly, either through their software isn't, or the way they approach data isn't altogether friendly. So I think on some level, the smaller the organization, the more simple a technology stack is. But if you go all the way down, I mean, let's just start a company here real quick. The three of us. Once we get up to 5, 7, 10, at one point we start bringing technology on board, and it might be things like Career Builder or Monster or Craigslist. We use that as our ATS or sourcing play, and then we use a ATS like CATS or Smart Recruiters, and kind of keep going along the line. At one point you wake up with Excel doing a lot of things in HR and recruiting, and then other tools outside of Excel. So we kind of start from the beginning of not really integrating technology. You have these Excel.
That all the time, William. I think that's the other thing, is that we can plan ahead, and someone could ask both you and I, what do we think is the best technology for doing this, and we could say, oh, it's this, and then next week something else could come in the market. We should say, actually, no, now we need this bright shiny object, and now we need this. And that's really the evolution that's caused this, that constantly we're needing to plumb in new bits of technology without necessarily a method to do that. And I think we can expect it to go that way. The other important point William's made is when we're talking about globalization, the way in which companies are growing globally is generally through acquisition and mergers and joint ventures. It's not so much organic, because that's the fastest way of doing it. What you usually find is when you're acquiring a company, you're also acquiring their legacy technology. So
That's right.
One of the companies I'm working with at the moment, we have 110 different ATSs. Pick one area out. So
you're acquiring all their bad decisions, essentially.
Yes.
Every bad decision that they've ever made.
Yeah,
you've now got your bad decisions and all of their bad decisions.
Right.
Yeah, but I think equally, talent acquisition organisations and any chiefs look at it will recognise that when they try and impose something on a local basis because they've acquired a company or because they've gone, right, we are all going to be Taleo, or we are all going to be PeopleSoft, and you're all going to use this system, and that this is the word, and it doesn't matter whether you're in Jakarta or you're in Istanbul, you're going to be using our system and it's going to work. And they kind of go, no, it doesn't quite work that way. And then you go somewhere like China and they go, oh, we have the Great Firewall of China in front of it, so we can only use a Chinese technology, right? So you've got to find, and I think that's the other part of integration, is saying, from a global point of view, how do we give people the local freedom to make their own technology decisions and use what works for them, while making sure everything's in the same format, so that as a global leader, I can get data, I can do analytics, I can look at performance and look at the important metrics country to country. And that's kind of how we end up in this place.
So some of that starts with the data.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well,
I think that. Go ahead. I will really be quiet. You're the guest. I'm just the host.
No, do you ever do that on FaceTime where you fake a So here's the thing. Some of that's a data standard. Companies have to think about a data standard, and they also have to think about properties in which they want all of their technologies to play. Bill's right. When you get down to localization, forcing a technology never works. But giving them the freedom to pick whatever they want, as long as it adheres to both a data standard and a protocol in which you want to both push and pull data. Now, if it does that, you're at least 10 steps ahead of everybody else.
Yeah. Well, what I was about to say was that I think that's what's held a lot of us back when it comes to shopping is, well, it has to work with this. That immediately cuts out vendors who are innovating, who are taking the next step, right? When you're saying, okay, no, I have to hold this line, whatever your line is, if it's your ATS, if it's your fill in the blank.
I'll play devil's advocate, though, real quickly. I tend to tell buyers to ask that question in the buying process. Who are you integrated with? How many integrations have you done? So I tend to tell buyers, don't be the guinea pig. Yes, there's other things that potentially are better, more innovative, etc. There's always a newer shiny object, as Bill has already talked about. But I tend to say, you know what, you got too many other things going on. Go into a situation and ask a greenhouse, if you will. Greenhouse, how many integrations have you done with RollPoint? Okay, 100? Yeah.
People have actually done that. I think that's the other thing. So what the situation that you've got, and we've seen this, particularly that it's really apparent in the mobile industry, is becoming increasingly apparent in the HR technology space, is it's not all of the not all of the players or stakeholders have their interests aligned. So it's not necessarily in the interest of one technology to play nicely with another. It's better to say we have a solution for that, or we can build something to do that, rather than say let's plumb everything together. So I think the key is, one of the keys is how you as a talent acquisition team or buyer view vendors. One is not to view them as vendors, but view them as partners. The other one is to bring everyone together as early as possible and say, we want to buy this as one technology. We understand that there might be 20 of you different parties involved in that. You need to go out and figure out how you're actually, you need to go away and figure out how you're going to do that. You need to play nicely. The API thing,
Bill's
open API key to that.
You're scratching around the edges of where it really hurts for practitioners, because at the end of the day, who funds integration? So it's not a question of who's going to get the most benefit out of it. The more integration is tied together, the more we can actually do some form of analytics. Like what most people don't get about an analytics package within a particular application is it's always good, but it only measures what's within the four walls of that particular application. Yeah. So yes, you'll have analytics inside your screening play, inside your assessment play, inside your ATS, whatever, but it doesn't go any further than the four walls. So we know that if integrations happen, data flows to and fro as it should, we can get analytics on a much larger scale. We know who benefits from this. This is painfully obvious. The organizations that buy and fund all these things benefit from it. But what we've never done a great job of is who funds this. Does the practitioner fund it who gets the benefit? Do they fund it? And if so, how do they budget for this? And if they don't fund it, is this a part of what vendors should be charging for? And is it baked into their license fee, etc.?
Well, I think that's what comes down to the open API, and how easy it is to integrate. There'll always be a little bit of technical work on both sides, but how easy and what's the history of it? What's the history of integration? So for me, in terms of funding, it's got to be included. The integration is part of the customization. There may be some cost involved in customization of technology. That should be a shared cost and shared risk, particularly when you're talking about a SaaS software where the revenue, the benefit is if you get that bit right, you get baked in properly, you're going to get recurring revenues. year after year. So for me, that's where it's got to sit, is where it's a shared cost, which is included in the customization piece. I think when you're looking at any software, really, there's three levels of what you want to be able to do, and the first one is customization, and a big part of customization is integration. How does this work with the other technology that I've got? The second one is workflow. If I'm going to plug something in and I'm going to integrate it, how does this change my workflow? If it doesn't really change your workflow, you're buying a luxury extra, you're probably wasting your money. But if it's going to change your workflow, how's the data going to move? And I think the other bit that people really have to think about when we talk about integrations are the human aspect of integration. If we change the flow of data, how does this change the work that gets done, or the way in which tasks and work get delivered? And what does that actually mean to people if we're going to start getting some level of adoption? Because we're seeing pretty clearly, I think, we've just come out of the HR Technology Jamboree, or we could call it the HR Technology Jamboree Part 1 in Chicago, and we've got Paris coming up, and I've been in Johannesburg and various other places looking at the equivalent HR Technology Jamborees. And I think we're seeing talent acquisition and HR falling into three clear stacks as to how we're setting things up. We've got pre-apply, which is everything from your external sourcing, dynamic profile, mobile apply, career site, landing pages, referrals, anything which involves the branding and the bringing of people in up to the point of when they apply. Then we've got the post-apply, and that's really the difference between the CRM and the ATS. And the post-apply is the ATS. Once you've hit the apply, what happens to you? How do you progress? Where have you got up to? And what we're seeing in talent acquisition is that post-apply goes all the way up to onboarding from an admin point of view. So it's everything in talent acquisition is up to all the paperwork's been signed, everyone's assigned, there is a start date, things are going on. And then we have a third piece, which I'm calling nurture and maintenance, for want of a better term, which is the standard admin HR systems. Are you getting paid at the right time? Are you getting the right benefits? You know how to do your expenses and all that kind of key stuff. And then we're seeing more nurture, for want of something else. We're calling it engagement right now, but all the things like wellness and wellness, learning and development, career development, nurture, retention, alumni, everything up to kind of the offboarding level sits in a third stack, collaboration and engagement. I think what we should be thinking about when we're talking about integration is how do we continue that in terms of data flow without the user having to change something. So if they're going from a pre-apply status where we're learning about them into an apply status where they've actually gone, yeah, put my hand up, I'm really interested in this job, let's apply for this job. How does that data continue to flow without us having to go back and say, hey, we know you've been talking to us for 3 months, 4 months, give us your email address again and tell us who you are and give us this information again. Because we're collecting all this data. And then equally, once you become an employee, day one you go into your employee system, you don't want to have to go, oh, give us your email again and tell us where you live. Tell us this information which we've been repeatedly asking. Give us a new resume. And in the same way as when I start doing, if I attend a training course and I go learn something different or a different discipline, I don't want to, and the company records that in the learning and development system, I don't want to have to go back in and go, oh, I'm going to update my internal resume for internal mobility. So I think that's kind of where I'm seeing the stack clearly is technology sits in one of those three definitions. I think we're getting it confused by things which should be overlaid. So something like employee engagement should actually be, engagement should be embedded in every software rather than being I think we have, I think what's confusing people in this area is we have categories of software in which there's no category of practice. That there's no methodology that matches up. This is why everyone's saying, well, what's employee engagement or what's candidate nurture or what's sourcing, and we end up talking about lots of different stuff. Actually, what we need to think about is the three horizontal stacks and then the vertical stack. Sorry, three vertical stacks and one horizontal stack, which says what are the things which are embedded in everything that we do, and how do we integrate that? So how do we integrate the engagement from one software to another? How do we integrate the collaboration? How do we take the information out that we're recording from one place, put it in another technology, then whatever. So for instance, if I go from the CRM to the ATS, as much as the information should flow in the ATS should also tell the CRM, this guy or this girl has now been hired. Therefore, we need to change their status for internal mobility. And it shouldn't rely on a person to go, oh, I've got to go and log into that system and do this stuff now. And I truly believe in talent acquisition. If we integrate everything properly, we'll probably take out about 80% of the administrative tasks that recruiters at the end of the day are usually the best paid administrators in the building, by necessity, not by design. And there's not enough time to get on in the tasks that will really make a difference. True integration will enable us to do that.
So what's the output for these TA leaders, right? We're talking about, so yeah, they have all these administrative duties taken away, but can you give me some examples of where this data is making a big impact for them or where they're able to make better decisions?
Sure, I'll take a step.
You want William on that? We'll be sorry.
We'll start. We'll get there.
William. I'm Bill.
So I think some of it is the hope of big data, and it's really truly a hope, is that you're sitting on enough data that you can then predict and forecast. Okay, so what's that predicated on? Well, and why should we pursue this noble goal? Well, you want data. Right now you've got databases, several different types of databases that are essentially stupid. They're dumb databases. They don't really tell you anything that you don't really know. They're repositories. We put data in them for a number of different reasons. And the data or the databases, we've never had the expectation that these things then inform us in a certain way. So one reason that you would pursue this lofty goal is to then be able to predict, to truly be able to use data and databases to tell you what's around the corner, what's coming next. Things like Tuesday's your best interview day, Sally's your best interview, or this is your best interview question, etc. So you got to have the data. And the reason that you want integrations is that every time, like Bill just explained a kind of a course of how data flows, well, if those are in separate systems, every time you have to go in and add data that's already there, you've increased your error rate. Okay, you've increased the position in which humans will make mistakes. And so if you have data like that flows from clunky system to clunky system, and you have to re-enter data, then again, the end goal, will you be able to predict off of that data, becomes less and less the more systems you have to do in the error rate. So you want the data that eventually, I mean, it's never going to be perfect, so let's kind of make sure we manage expectations. You're always going to be cleaning data, you're always going to be scrubbing it, you're always going to be kind of perfecting the data that you have, and you'll never have enough data to make, yourself satisfied with the decisions that you make. However, the more you integrate, the less your error rate, okay? And the less your error rate, the more you can kind of trust the data that's there, so that that data, and the expectation is that that data helps you make informed business decisions. Doesn't take away the humans. I think yet another thing that we probably should talk about is, I think sometimes people are terrified that the computers are all going to make, the bots are all going to make decisions for us or eradicate the necessity to have humans. That's not true. First of all, it's just baseless, but let's just say it's not true and just kind of move on. The thing is you want to be able to make data-driven decisions where you've looked at the data has told you something, and then you apply logic, your experience, all kinds of other things to the data. But you're making data-driven decisions. And so I think that, outcome, What is the outcome? Well, I think the one of the end goals is that you're sitting on data and databases that help fill in things that you don't know. And so I think for me, one of the noble pursuits of why you do integrations and why you would go through all this kind of heartache is get to a point where the databases are telling you things that you just could never forecast and never see. And in order to do so, you want as good a data as you can possibly get so that you can do that.
Yeah, I mean, I could give you a really simple example of that. One of the organisations that I work with, we had to figure out why we couldn't hire enough graduates when there was a wealth of graduates available. Now, in order to get all the data understood exactly how someone was hired, first of all, there's three things when you look at hiring. One is, I've never been to an organisation where people understand how people get hired. They really see the talent acquisition team as a group of Harry Potters, or Harriet Potters, and we suddenly go, Expelliarmus and 10 people to that on Monday and go to onboarding, right? That's the way the magic happens. And when I sit down and say, how do people get hired, I can always be told on a top level when there's a first interview, a second interview, a screening test, video interview, and assessment. But when you say to people, so, okay, how does that actually happen? Tell me how that happens. So for graduates in this particular organisation, and this isn't unusual, there were 52 touch points and 48 people involved in that. And that could be, you could say, well, there's an interview, first interview. When you say, how does a first interview happen? They'll go, somebody from the admin team schedules it. They go in the diary room, they talk to the person who organises the conference room. They confirm the conference room, you book the time. The confirmation email goes out to the candidate. They reply. It goes to the line manager's PA. The line manager's PA puts it in their diary. And these are all the different touch points that go on, which are very rarely joined up. What that means is when you get a blockage, it's very difficult for you to say, this is why we can't hire people. This is why we can't meet our time to hire. And in that particular case, it actually took 3 weeks to get all the data out. And we had to go into 4 different systems, including diary systems and Outlook and stuff like that, and manually extract that data. Once we did that, we could fix the problem in 5 minutes. Once we looked at all the numbers in a line, we could see that the reason we couldn't hire enough graduates was we didn't have enough interview rooms. So we either had to, because there was a schedule by which you could order interview rooms and they got booked and that kind of stuff. Very difficult to see what the problem is. I think the other thing is it creates time. I think we don't give out awards, and I think it's something at Recruiting Daily we should look at. We don't give out awards for recruiter experience. We all talk about candidate experience and how important that is and all that kind of thing. But if the recruiter experience isn't right and there isn't enough time to do things, the candidate experience is going to be poor, the hiring manager experience is going to be poor, and so on and so on. And I think the recruiter experience part of having enough time to do what's being asked of you is what's pushing this to a tipping point. Mm-hmm. More and more of our recruiters in talent acquisition have very little control over the technology and the processes that they work to, their method of working. Very little freedom over determining that. That's something that's a C-suite decision, or certainly the C-suite of talent acquisition. Very little involvement in the, if any, in the technology that they buy and how it plugs together. But are being asked to do more and more and more. They're being told, candidate experience, you need to give feedback, you need to increase the volume of hires, you need to reduce the time of hire, you need to do more stuff. We're piling more and more stuff onto already overloaded front end. We need you to create content, we want you to tweet, we want you to be the employer brand ambassador, all this kind of stuff that we're loading more and more on our recruiters, that actually what we need to look at is say, okay, if we break your job down, 80% of what you're doing is things which A, you're not very good at, and B, you don't like very much, which is the admin, the scheduling, the logistics of people, the talking to hiring managers, the chasing of resumes and finding out what's going on. If we can integrate that, if we can integrate those systems and integrate that information to work in our advantage, we can then actually go back and say, you know what we're going to do is we're going to give you time to do the recruiting piece. automate everything through, I call them cobots, so collaborative robots. So it's automating a lot of the process, whether that's sourcing, searching, scheduling, using things like video interview, whatever tools we're using to make sure they work together seamlessly. It means we can actually say, you know what, as a recruiter, you can go back to what it says on your business card. You can go back to recruiting. You can have more time in it. You can interview people properly. You have more time to get job briefs and talk to hiring managers about what's going on. And if we integrate everything properly so that we get the data, the workflow, the pictures we look on hiring as project management, will give you time to do the job that at the moment you don't have time to do by taking away all the other rubbish from you, which you don't like doing anyway.
Absolutely.
That was a bit of a rant, really. It's kind of.
It's a good
It
rant.
makes sense, though. Yeah. No, I think it definitely makes sense, and the more that we can do to save recruiters time so that they actually have time to recruit, I feel like
The
we're
recruiter
actually
experience.
contributing to the bottom line.
Yeah, step
Yeah,
aside,
recruiter experience awards.
step aside, Jerry
I love
Christmas,
it.
the new cat in town. We're going to do the recruiter experience awards. We
Oh.
decided today. We've got the president on the line. He can commit to that.
Love it. So we have about 2 more minutes, and I just want to give a talk. I want to directly address middleware and what RollPoint offers, because obviously both of you have expertise in that software and understanding what it very specifically contributes. So if you can give me, either of you 2 minutes or both on how RollPoint specifically addresses a lot of these issues that we've been talking about.
Well, it's very simple. It's pure integration software, so it's not emulation. So it sits as a level for data transfer. So it can take data in one format from one place, convert it into the other, and also extract it. So if you imagine it, and what I talked about earlier, emulation would mean upload a resume, and then it's as if I've actually sent that to William, and he's sat there in wherever he is saying, okay, I'll put this into the technology. Just done in an automated way with the Tincup bot, whatever that is. Now imagine that actually we're not doing that. What we're doing is taking the information and putting it straight in the other software. But if something happens, so if I'm in the ATS and I get to second interview or I get hired, the data is coming back to affect the operation of the CRM that said, or the referral system that says this person that got recommended got hired. So what it does is it's a translator for data. It's like a Google Translate for data or information to make sure that both systems can understand each other and are speaking the same language. And it's an operating system that says these are the things that need to happen in these two technologies if this action happens. Like if this person gets hired, these are the things that need to happen in the payroll or the HR system. That's really what RollPoint's developed better than anyone else, and it's it sounds complicated. It's actually a piece of code. It takes you about 30 seconds to carry out that integration because they've already done the hard yards on 20 or so different ATSs and technologies. So I recommend you go and have a look at it. More importantly, I recommend you try it. When they tell you how easy it is, you're not going to believe them. So go try it. Go try it. And
the only thing I'd add is kind of how they got there or why they got there. Bill already explained all the guts, if you will. But if you look back at the heritage of RollPoint, they started externally trying to solve one of the holy grails of HR, and that is what is a referral. A referral from your top talent. It reduces recruiting costs, it increases morale. It's like we all know that referrals are great, especially the right referrals, right? So when RollPoint first started, they pointed the gun there to try and solve that. But what they found through their own clients and also some of their own innovation is that there's yet another place in the organization that needs this, and that's internal mobility. And it's just as important, and turns out companies aren't that great at internal mobility. And so in order to be able to interact with all of those different technologies, they had to get great at integrations. Because both on the external side and internal side, you've got a whole host of different technologies to play with, and so they got great at integrations because if for no other reason than they had to, because of where they played. And so yeah, like Bill, I'd say go take a look at it, go try it. It's wonderful software, and it's also got the right heritage. It's coming from the right place.
Very cool. Well, thank you both for your time. I really appreciate it. And I hope everyone watching this learned a little something. And thank you again to RollPoint for sponsoring. We really appreciate the opportunity to create this great content. And stay tuned because there's more great webinars coming your way. Thanks.